Most men don't realize this truth until it's too late. When she starts pulling away, they chase harder, believing effort can restore what energy has already lost. But here's the truth no one told you. The moment you stop chasing her validation, she starts chasing her doubts. For years, men have been conditioned to believe that attention equals love, that devotion will always be rewarded. You were told to explain yourself, to apologize for being misunderstood, to earn affection through performance. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that silence can speak louder than words. Now you find yourself walking on eggshells in your own relationship, giving more, receiving less, and calling it loyalty. You confuse exhaustion with love and tolerance with strength. But what if the very act of chasing is what kills desire? The truth is simple, but confronting. You are not losing her. You're losing yourself. And when a man loses himself, everything around him begins to slip. In this video, we'll explore what truly happens when a woman feels your detachment, the psychological shift, the hidden fear, and the magnetic pull that begins the moment you stop trying to prove your worth. By the end, you'll understand why silence isn't weakness, it's presence. And presence is power. When you stop chasing her validation, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold. The room feels different. The energy shifts. What once felt certain becomes uneasy, and she can't quite name why. You haven't argued, you haven't accused, you haven't withdrawn in anger, you've simply gone still. And in that stillness, her world starts to rearrange itself. At first, she tells herself nothing's changed, but she feels it. The silence that used to mean calm now feels heavy. Your usual eagerness, that warm energy that once surrounded her, is gone. She can feel the emptiness where your attention used to live, and it unsettles her, not because she's lost you, but because she's lost control. When a man detaches, even quietly, it sends a frequency through the space between them. It says, "I no longer need to be understood to be at peace." That message doesn't need words. It's felt in the pauses, in the absence of explanations, in the way your eyes stop asking for something they once needed. She senses it long before she understands it. Your calm becomes her mirror, and in that mirror, she begins to see herself, the ways she took your presence for granted, the ways she assumed your patience had no end. The mind of a woman, especially one who's grown used to your availability, is deeply tuned to emotional rhythm. When that rhythm falters, when your energy no longer moves around her moods, she begins to panic in quiet ways. The overthinking begins. The late-night messages appear, the subtle reach-outs masked as casual check-ins, all small signs of an inner storm. Your silence has become her signal, not a punishment, not a threat, but a truth too loud to ignore. You see, most men think power lives in expression, in convincing, in fighting to be heard. But true power lives in stillness. When you stop explaining your worth, you begin to embody it. That calm, steady energy, the one that no longer bends to win affection, that's the moment you become unpredictable again. And unpredictability, to the feminine heart, is magnetic. Because when she can no longer predict you, she has to feel you. She has to wonder again. That's the paradox of attraction. The more a man reveals, the less she imagines. The less she imagines, the less she feels. Mystery is not a game. It's the space that allows admiration to breathe. When she can no longer read every move, she starts listening for what's unspoken. And in that silence, respect quietly returns. Detachment, then, is not about coldness. It's about clarity. It's the realization that love without respect is dependency, and connection without balance is control. A man who remains calm while others seek reaction is not emotionless. He's centered. He's learned that emotion doesn't need to be broadcast to be real. He feels deeply, but acts selectively. That self-containment is power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that grounds. You stop being a wave crashing for attention and become the tide itself, steady, unbothered, inevitable. When you no longer orbit around someone's validation, your gravity changes, and she feels that shift instantly. Every word you don't say, every reaction you don't give, becomes its own message. It says, "I've outgrown this performance." It says, I choose peace over persuasion. And she feels it deeply, because nothing haunts a person like the silence of someone who once cared too much. Have you noticed how silence turns into the longest conversation she ever has with you? She replays your last words, searching for hidden meaning. She wonders if you're done, if you've met someone else, if you even think about her at all. What she doesn't realize is that your silence isn't about her. It's about reclaiming yourself. You've stopped chasing the illusion of control that comes from being needed and returned to the reality of power that comes from being complete. Predictability dies where mystery begins. When she always knew you'd text first, she stopped wondering if you would. When she always knew you'd forgive, she stopped fearing the loss. When she always knew you'd be available, she stopped valuing your time. But the moment your pattern breaks, the moment you stop chasing comfort, she starts chasing clarity. And clarity is the one thing her ego fears most. Comfort is seductive because it feels safe. But comfort breeds complacency, and complacency kills desire. The moment you became predictable, she stopped seeing the man and started seeing the habit. But the moment you stepped back, when your silence replaced reassurance, she began to feel what she had stopped noticing: your presence. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to prove your worth. You only need to stop leaking energy where it's not honored. And when you do, the shift is undeniable. She feels the distance not as rejection, but as reflection. She begins to ask herself questions she never asked before. Why does his silence bother me this much? What does his calm say about me? That's the quiet power of detachment. It doesn't scream. It reveals. It shows her what her comfort had hidden, that your attention was never a given, that your validation was never endless, that your love was an offering, not an obligation. And once she realizes that, she starts to change. Some women rise to meet that new standard, others withdraw, but either way, the balance is restored. You are no longer the one waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. So the next time you feel her pulling away, remember, the answer isn't to chase. The answer is to return to yourself. Because when you stop chasing her validation, she starts chasing her doubts. And in that doubt, she'll meet the truth you've already learned, that silence, when it comes from peace, is the loudest form of strength there is. And here's where the story deepens. Because once you've pulled your energy back, once your silence begins to fill the space where explanation used to live, something powerful happens. The balance shifts. What once felt like her stage becomes yours. What once belonged to her control now moves under your calm rhythm. Silence isn't absence. It's presence without permission. It's the quiet declaration that you will no longer spend your energy convincing anyone of your worth. When you stop speaking, she begins to listen, not to your words, but to your absence. She realizes that your attention, which once seemed infinite, was never guaranteed. And that realization hits harder than any argument ever could. Because attention, in its purest form, is currency, and you've stopped spending it carelessly. In that silence, something sacred happens. You show that your energy is earned, not given. Your boundaries speak for you. The calm in your demeanor becomes the new language of power. There's a depth in your quiet that words could never touch, because words often dilute the truth, while silence distills it. When a man goes quiet from peace, not anger, not manipulation, it carries weight. She begins to understand that your withdrawal is not a tactic. It's a statement. It says, I'm no longer where I'm not valued. That kind of silence doesn't seek attention. It demands respect. The silence you hold becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything she once ignored. She begins to see the imbalance, the small ways she took your time and focus for granted. It's uncomfortable for her, because silence exposes what noise once covered. And while noise distracts, silence reveals. It reveals where love ended and convenience began. Then the testing begins. Once she senses that you've truly detached, that you're not playing, that you're not waiting for her to notice, she tests the foundation. This isn't cruelty, it's instinct. She needs to know if your stillness is real or temporary. She will send subtle signals, crafted to provoke a response. the casual message at midnight, the unexpected story post, the half-hearted joke with an edge. Each one is a small experiment. Is he still there? Most men fail this test. They take the bait. They rush back with explanation or validation, trying to prove they still care. But the moment you react, you confirm her control. You show that her emotions still guide yours. That's not love. That's dependency disguised as connection. True control is not about power over her. It's power over yourself. Emotional control is your leverage. You can feel without reacting. You can want without needing. And in that restraint, your presence becomes magnetic again. Because the man who remains composed through provocation is the one she begins to respect and quietly fear losing. There's something about composure that unnerves people. It's rare. It's unsettling. In a world addicted to reaction, calm feels like mystery. When she sees that her words, her silence, her mood swings no longer move you, she realizes she's no longer in charge of your emotional weather. And that's when her curiosity turns into reflection. She begins to ask herself, what changed in him? She replays the moments she overlooked, the small ways she pushed, the ways she took your presence as certainty. Because she can no longer feel your orbit, she starts to feel her own instability. Your silence becomes her mirror, and that's the most uncomfortable reflection there is. Here's the paradox. She might try to pull you back, but deep down, she's drawn to the very strength that keeps you still. Your silence doesn't just unsettle her, it grounds her. It reminds her of something she lost sight of. That real connection can't be forced, and real respect can't be demanded. But you must hold the line, because the moment you break the silence to make her feel better, you lose the power that silence gave you. You remind her that she can still move you. And once she knows that, the dynamic collapses. Let the space do the work. Distance breeds curiosity. Curiosity fuels attraction. When you stop flooding the connection with words, the silence starts echoing in her mind. She begins to wonder where you went, not physically, but emotionally. The silence she once hated becomes the mirror she must face. It forces her to confront her own inconsistencies, her ego, her assumptions about how much of your presence was guaranteed. And that's why silence is not passive. It's active space. It's the room you give her to feel the absence of what she once dismissed. When you hold that silence, truly hold it, you allow her to sit in the discomfort long enough to realize what she's lost. Do not rush to fill that space. Don't check in. Don't explain. Don't rescue her from the tension. Let her stay there, because that's where realization happens. That's where she either grows or fades. Every text you don't send, every thought you don't externalize, every impulse you resist, it all speaks louder than any message ever could. It says, I am not here to be managed. I am here to be met. And if she's capable of meeting you there, in the quiet, in the calm, in the balance, then the connection evolves. But if she can't, then silence becomes your filter. It removes what's weak, what's manipulative, what's temporary. This is the true power shift. You're no longer trying to be understood. You're simply being. You're no longer proving your value. You're embodying it. You're no longer fighting for attention. You've become the standard it seeks. She might not say it, but she feels it. In every unanswered message, in every moment, your energy doesn't rush to meet hers. Because deep down, she knows that once a man learns to be silent with peace, he can never be controlled again. So let your silence speak. Let your calm unsettle. Let your absence remind her that your presence was never a guarantee. Because silence, when it comes from strength, doesn't end connection, it defines it. It draws a line between what was taken for granted and what must now be earned. And when that realization finally sinks in, she'll understand what words could never explain. You didn't disappear to punish her. You disappeared to remember yourself. And so, as silence stretches and the dust begins to settle, something profound begins to emerge. What you once thought of as distance starts to feel like clarity. What felt like loss turns into balance. You realize you didn't walk away from her. You walked back to yourself. She doesn't miss you when you talk. She misses you when you're gone. Because words can be replaced, but presence cannot. It's your absence, calm, unapologetic, complete, that echoes in her mind long after the noise fades. This is where true detachment lives. not in coldness, not in cruelty, but in calm knowing. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. You stop begging for alignment that doesn't exist. You stop fighting for someone who doesn't meet you halfway. You start choosing peace over persuasion. You can care deeply and still walk away. You can love her voice, her laughter, her warmth, and still decide that your sanity is worth more than her inconsistency. That is the quiet strength most men never discover. Detachment isn't the death of love. It's the purification of it. It's love without dependency, connection without chaos. It's the ability to look at someone and say, I want you here, but I'll still be whole if you leave. And that kind of peace, that rootedness, makes a man unforgettable. Because he's not driven by fear of loss, he's guided by respect for himself. When you reach that point, something shifts inside her too. The dynamic reverses once again, not because you played a trick, but because you grew. Your absence forces her to see what your presence had blinded her to. The value of a man who didn't just stay, but who led with calm strength. Some women rise to meet that level. They see your restraint and respond with effort. They soften, they listen, they realign. That's growth. That's connection reborn in truth. But others, they fade. They retreat back into their comfort zone, back to noise, back to the predictable. And as painful as that might be, it's still a win. Because detachment reveals truth. It shows who's willing to grow beside you, and who only loved the version of you that was easy to control. Either way, you reclaim your power. When you no longer chase, you begin to attract differently. When you stop fighting to be understood, you start to be respected. And when you stop explaining your peace, you start living it. Her reaction then is not rejection, it's revelation. She shows you who she really is once she no longer has the power to pull your strings. If she meets your calm with maturity, you've found something rare. If she meets it with chaos, you've found your exit. Both outcomes serve your evolution. Both are blessings, even if one hurts more. Because in the end, detachment is not about winning her back. It's about winning yourself back. And that victory demands discipline. Freedom doesn't come from cutting people off, it comes from mastering your own impulses. Silence, when used with intention, isn't cold. It's structure. It's the quiet architecture of your peace. It builds walls where you once left doors wide open. It filters energy. It protects your focus. It preserves your worth. Discipline, in that sense, isn't about control. It's about self-respect. It's the ability to feel the pull of emotion and still choose direction over reaction. To want to text her, but not need to. To see her provoke you and still stay unmoved. To know that your emotions belong to you, not to the moment. That's the freedom most men confuse with loneliness. But it isn't loneliness. It's sovereignty. The man who walks alone doesn't lose women. He loses noise. He loses the constant chatter of self-doubt, the exhausting urge to prove, the endless chase for validation. What remains is clean, quiet, and strong, the foundation of real power. It's easy to love when things are exciting. It's harder to love when things are uncertain. Detachment gives you that strength. You stop trying to control the outcome and start controlling your response. You stop asking, what do I need to do to keep her? And start asking, who do I need to be to stay at peace? And when you find that answer, when you can finally stand still in the middle of her silence, her distance, her tests, something remarkable happens. You no longer fear losing her because you've already found yourself. That's the highest form of strength. Not the man who conquers others, but the man who no longer collapses when others leave. Not the man who reacts to every pull, but the one who moves with quiet certainty. Not the man who depends on approval, but the one who builds his peace from within. And here's the paradox. That's the very moment she starts to feel your absence the most. Because what she thought was detachment turns out to be presence, a deeper kind. The kind that lingers even when you're not there. The kind that doesn't beg to be seen, yet can't be forgotten. You've become rare, and rarity commands reflection. She may come back, or she may not, but that's no longer your concern. You've already won the only battle that mattered, the one within yourself, the battle between needing and knowing, between attachment and awareness. So when you find yourself standing in that quiet, Don't rush to fill it. Don't reach back out just to ease the tension. Stay still. Let peace become your habit. Let discipline become your rhythm. Because when you master detachment, life stops being a chase and becomes a choice. And in that stillness, you'll see the truth clearly. She doesn't miss the man who always spoke. She misses the man who finally went silent, not because he gave up, but because he grew up. When she finally realizes you've stopped chasing, she'll feel something she didn't expect. Not anger, not pride, but silence. The kind of silence that speaks of peace, of a man who chose himself instead of trying to be chosen. That's the moment everything changes. Not because you proved anything, but because you remembered who you are. So if this message spoke to you, if you're ready to build calm strength, quiet confidence, and a deeper understanding of connection, subscribe to Charismand. This is where we break the patterns that drain your power and rebuild the mindset that draws respect without effort. Your next step starts now. Watch the next video to go deeper into the psychology of attraction, communication, and presence, because once you master your silence, you'll never need to chase again.